Hi, it's Fredette and welcome back to another Mom Chat Mondays. Today's episode is an episode that is long overdue. I am finally sharing my pregnancy and birth story of when I was pregnant with Declan. I've alluded to the story in many videos of how difficult that first pregnancy was for me, but finally I'm gonna go into detail of exactly what happened from beginning to end, not just for you, but for me to document the situation. It's been over 2 years since this whole thing happened, so I wanna finally get it out before I forget any more pieces. My channel is as much for me and my recollection of things and for me to look back on that it is for you guys watching. So I want to get this out before the next baby comes and that birth story gets mixed up with Declan's. So without further ado, let's get started. To fully understand the journey I had with Declan's birth, I have to go back to the pregnancy before Declan's birth. Some of you are aware that we had a miscarriage before the pregnancy I had with Declan. So you may be wondering, what does that have to do with Declan's pregnancy journey? Well, it actually has a lot to do with it. So to go back from the very beginning of where it started, it was 2019 and Brody and I were looking to buy a home. And why that is important is because I was not on birth control. I haven't been on birth control for years. I think I was on birth control for like 3 months out of my whole life. It didn't sit well with me, whatever. I wasn't on hormonal birth control, I should say. My form of birth control was tracking my ovulation through an ovulation app called Natural Cycles, and I touched upon this app on a previous Mom Chat Monday video about important apps for pregnancy, ovulation, all that good stuff. During this time, we were so busy trying to find a home and everything that comes with that I wasn't really tracking my ovulation properly. And so lo and behold, a month after we bought our house and moved, actually not even a month, 2 weeks after we bought our house and moved in, I found out that I was pregnant, and this was December 2019. We weren't expecting it, but we obviously also weren't shocked we were having sex. I never understand when people are having unprotected sex and they say they're surprised when they get pregnant. We knew it was a possibility, but we weren't expecting it and we hadn't planned for it. But we were excited. We make an appointment to go do our first ultrasound, and our first appointment is at 7 weeks. So we go and we meet our doctor, and I'm gonna just call him, for the sake of this video, Dr. N. So Dr. N, we can tell he's a very accomplished guy. He's the head of obstetrics at the hospital. It's his practice, it's his name that's on the practice, and he is also a very, very busy guy. I don't know how many patients he has at one time, but he's clearly the most in-demand doctor in the whole town. He sees the baby in there, he sees the sac, but he's like, I can't hear a heartbeat. And we're like, what do you mean? What does that mean? Mind you, this is our first time doing any of this, so we don't know what to expect. So we're like, okay, what does that mean? He's like, well, it's still kind of early, so let's make another appointment for 9 weeks, so 2 weeks out, and maybe by then the heartbeat will be strong enough for us to hear on the monitor. Fine with me. So we leave. Within this 2-week period that we're waiting to see the doctor, I start spotting, like light pink, light spotting. So I'm like, I don't know what this means, but I hope it's not a miscarriage. I hope when we go back, the baby's heartbeat will be there. 2 weeks later, we come back and still no heartbeat. So the doctor is like, this is not a viable pregnancy. The baby is not growing. It's still measuring 6.5, 7 weeks, and you're supposed to be 9 weeks at this point. So this is not a viable pregnancy, and we need to start talking about next steps. He's saying all this and it's going in through one ear, and I'm just in shock because I never thought this would be part of our journey. And I look at Brody, he looks at me, and we're just in shock. Meanwhile, the doctor's still talking, and I'm just it's not coming in. So in the end, he's like, you have 2 options. I can either give you medication for your body to rid itself of the pregnancy, or we can schedule a surgery so we could do it then. But he was like, keep in mind, if you do the medication route, your body can start to reject the pregnancy at any given time. You can be at work, you could be driving to work, you could be at the grocery store. And that just was I was like, I do not want to go through this in the office, like sitting in my cubicle, and all of a sudden no. So I was like, okay, let's just go the surgery route. It'll be quick and easy. I just want to get this over with. I want to move on from this traumatic experience. Just like the way he was saying everything was just so like matter of fact. He had like no compassion in his voice. I don't know if it's because he was a male doctor or because he has a very thick accent and he's not from here, so I don't know if his demeanor is just a cultural thing, I don't know, but he just had terrible bedside manner, but he was very matter of fact. So we scheduled the surgery. I'm freaking out because the last time I had surgery was when I was 14 to get my appendix out. Since then, I had watched like Awake and other surgery movies, and I was afraid of surgery, to be honest. I was just sitting there like shaking because I was nervous and I didn't know what to expect after. And then I was looking at Brody and he was just so like scared for me too. So anyway, the doctor was like an hour late. We had to push my surgery back an hour because, like I said, he's a busy guy. So by the time he showed up, my nerves were at an all-time high. I was like shaking. I don't know if I was shaking or shivering because I was cold. Maybe a combination of the two. But I was like, okay, let's just get this show on the road. Let's get done with it. They wheeled me back to the surgery room and they told me to count back from 10. And I remember getting to 9 and then I just felt like this rush of, it was such a weird sensation, but I was out. I wake up and Birdie's next to me and the nurse is next to me. Dr. N came to the room for maybe 30 seconds after that and was like, surgery went well. Let me know if any issues come up. Out. Like, I'm telling you, maybe 15 to 30 seconds he was in that room. The nurse came in and she was like telling me what to, like the feelings I should be expecting and giving Brody notes for home care, all that stuff. So we go home and I'm in the bed and I'm just like in so much pain, which is to be expected because like your uterus is shrinking because what was once there is not there anymore, so your body has to adjust and adapt. They said I should be in pain for maybe 2-3 days. So tell me why 5 days later, I was in the most excruciating pain of my life. I've never felt any of those. It almost felt like contractions, but that's the best I can describe them. It hurt to even breathe. So Brody's like, this shouldn't be happening. Let's go to the emergency room just to make sure everything is okay. Now, the emergency room that we ended up going to wasn't the hospital that the doctor who did my surgery was the head of obstetrics in. It was a different hospital because my insurance, good old American insurance, didn't have coverage at that hospital where he worked. So we had to go to a different hospital, which might have been for the best because I had another doctor's opinion. So we waited in that emergency room for maybe 7 hours and I was like doubled over in the waiting room. It was a thing. So we go back and they finally checked to make sure there wasn't any like leftover pieces from my surgery or any other like damage that happened during the surgery. They do a whole internal ultrasound. The doctor says there's scar tissue, but other than that, like everything seems to be relatively normal. So they give me some pain meds and then send us on our way. We go home and that's that for that story, or so we think. So this all happened in February of 2020. So we go home and we're just like in the lowest point ever. We decide to get a dog. So that's where Lonnie came in. We got him February 16th, 2020, which is funny because it's a year, exactly a year to the day before Declan was born. Declan was born February 16th, 2021. So we get a dog, we go back to work, we try to proceed with life as usual. And then in March 2020, the pandemic hits and we're on lockdown. I use this time to really just get back into shape mentally and physically and move on from that situation. Enjoy our new dog and all the responsibilities that came with that. And then June or July, we find out that we're expecting again. I don't know, when you've had a miscarriage before, the excitement of finding out you're pregnant is kind of tainted in a way. So we were excited, but we were also super nervous of like what to find out because we had never heard a heartbeat. So when I made that appointment for my first ultrasound, there was just so much around that. But what I knew is that I didn't want the same doctor I had with my previous pregnancy. One, because he has a very thick accent, so sometimes it's very hard to understand what he was saying. He's very smart and clearly very accomplished, but like I felt like if I'm gonna go through this journey, I need to be understanding everything that you're saying. And I don't. And two, he was just like the most busiest guy ever, and I didn't want to be one of many pregnant women under his care. I wanted to have a doctor that would be more focused on me, not like just me, but like would have more time to listen to my questions and give me longer than 5 minutes in appointment. So I looked for another doctor in his practice. More specifically, I looked for a black doctor, black female doctor, because I feel like female doctors are more in tune. Well, this is what I felt at the time. Female doctors are more in tune with women and like issues that may come up. They all went to school, obviously, but I just, from a personal standpoint, I just felt more comfortable with a female doctor at that stage. I've had many male OBs and it's totally fine, but during pregnancy, I just feel like female doctors are more personable. And I also was looking for a black female doctor just because black maternal rates are just in the gutter. I wanted a doctor who would be able to understand where I was coming from a cultural standpoint, from a race standpoint, from a female standpoint, just someone, I wanted someone who would look like me, period. That's what it was. So I found the only female black doctor in his practice, actually the only female black doctor, I think, within 20 miles of me. The reviews that I could see were pretty good, so I was like, okay, let's go with her. Let's call her Dr. C. At the first appointment, everything went great. I loved her energy. I thought she was really attentive to my needs and really listened to my story. And I was like, great, I think I found the doctor for me. And I asked her, will you be my doctor when I give birth? Like, will you be there to deliver my baby? And she was like, it really depends, but 90% chance, yes. Remember this part, okay? Dr. C, my new doctor, is what you call a TV doctor. She's on a few shows. I didn't think that would really matter because, I don't know, I just didn't think anything of it at the time, but it becomes a factor later on. So we start going through the pregnancy and I start spotting. Right away, my heart drops because I think, oh, this is another miscarriage. And this goes on for maybe 2 weeks, off and on. Like I'll spot a day here and then I won't spot again, and then like 4 days later I'll start spotting again. Mind you, we had heard the heartbeat this time, so I was excited that at least we had a heartbeat, and that was great. So when I did start spotting, I didn't know what to think. So at my next ultrasound appointment, I tell the doctor, hey, listen, I'm spotting and it's very worrisome for me because I already had this previous miscarriage, and so spotting to me doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem normal. She's like, oh, well, spotting is actually very normal, and because we're looking at the ultrasound and everything else looks good, like this is probably just, it's a nothing spotting. So I was like, okay, as long as you think it's normal. Like I was putting all my faith in her. One, because I wanted so desperately to believe her, and two, because like, I mean, she's a doctor. So at this point, I'm at 9-10 weeks pregnant, and we go on a little trip down to Laguna Beach, whatever, and we do grown-up things, we have sex. The next day, it's like a rush of blood. So I'm like crying in the bathroom and he's like panicking. We go back to the doctor and we do an ultrasound and baby's okay. So I'm like, what the hell? So I asked her like, oh, should we just stop having sex? And she's like, well, no, there's no indication here that there's anything wrong. Mind you, I had just, up until this point, we had only done external ultrasounds. Like we hadn't done any like vaginal ultrasounds. So I was like, okay, she doesn't think we should stop having sex, but I think just for our own like peace of mind, let's just stop. And Brady was like, yeah, let's not do that anymore. So we didn't have sex from this point on, but the spotting continued, not as aggressive as it was after that time, but still here and there. And I kept telling her like, look, I really don't think this is normal. And she even said, a lot of new parents like get overly concerned with small things, but it's really not. Like she basically was dismissing me and thinking I'm like just new mom scared of things. So it's like, okay, clearly she's not taking me seriously, so I'm just gonna have to just pray and hope that she's right. This leads me up to my 20-week anatomy scan. At 20 weeks, you go see a maternal fetal medicine doctor who basically checks to make sure like all the limbs, amniotic fluid, make sure everything is growing normally. And this is around maybe a few weeks before Thanksgiving 2020. The appointment goes great, but at the end of the appointment, Brody asks, oh, my wife wants us to go back to her parents' house in Maryland for Thanksgiving. Is it safe to travel? Now, luckily he asked this question because no one had said anything about anything being wrong until that question was asked. When he asked that question, the lady, let's call her Dr. K, looks at the graph. She's like, actually, you know what? Your cervix is actually really short. I would not recommend traveling at all or doing unnecessary movements altogether. Huh? This is the very first time I've heard that my cervix is anything other than normal. And I wouldn't have even heard about that then had my husband not asked you if I could travel. Like, it was just like, my mind was blown. So then I told her that I've been experiencing bleeding throughout my entire first and second trimester up until that point, and everyone had dismissed it as something normal, and could that have been symptoms of my cervix basically disintegrating? And she's like, yeah, that pretty much. Tears. It was a horrible feeling of just helplessness, because I knew something was wrong and I didn't speak up hard enough, or I didn't know how to speak up hard enough at that time. So I just felt like I had failed my unborn baby, and everything was, it was just a horrible feeling. So she's like, don't panic. Your cervix is at 2.1 centimeters. It's short, but not too worrisome. Like, I think the average of that time was like 4 point something, and I was at 2, so I was like half of the average. So I was like, okay, that seems short. It was gonna get shorter. And so I asked her, I was like, should I just go on bed rest? Should I just stop moving? She's like, oh, I don't think that's necessary. Just limit your movements, but like, you don't have to be on full bed rest. You're 21 weeks. We stop giving cerclages at 24 weeks. So come see me in 2 weeks, and then we'll see where we should go from there. And we'll still have the option to do a cerclage if need be at that time, if your cervix shrinks anymore. We go home and I wait until that next appointment that I had made with Dr. K. I show up to the appointment by myself. I think Brody had to work or something. And she proceeds to tell me that my cervix had shrunk to 0.08 centimeters or millimeters, basically the length of a pinky nail. And my heart was in my throat. I didn't know what to say, because I was like, clearly it shrunk 2 centimeters in the 2 weeks that you told me to wait. She's like, okay, let's call your doctor and schedule a cerclage. She's the one who calls him, Dr. N. She's like, okay, your patient is here. Her cervix has shrank to this many, whatever, and we need to schedule cerclage. He's on the other end and he says, oh no, like, it's too late. And so she comes back and tells me this, and I'm like, what do you mean she's like, what? I'm like, what do you said we would still have enough time in 2 weeks. And he's like, he's over there right now. He says to go over there. I am like walking on eggshells times 10. I'm afraid to move, because I'm like, if I move too quickly or whatever, like, this baby's just gonna fall out of me. This is my thought. So I'm calling Brody and I'm like, you need to get here. Like, I'm sobbing, like, it's horrible. We go see him. He's like, your cervix is so short that your water bag, if we do the surgery, if we give you the cerclage and I accidentally nip your water bag and your water breaks, your baby is only 23 weeks. We don't do life-saving measures until 24 weeks, so you would automatically have a miscarriage on the table. So I'll be put under, and I may or may not wake up to not being pregnant. He's like, you have 30 minutes to make a decision, because if we're gonna do this, we have to do it now. There's no time to wait. So I was like 30 minutes to figure out if you're gonna proceed with a process that may or may not end up with you losing your baby. It was a lot to take in. And this was the same doctor who I'd gone through the miscarriage with, the one who I couldn't really understand, and the one who was like very matter of fact, no bedside manner, the one who was super busy. So I was like, oh no, we're back to where I didn't want to be. So I like prayed on it, but I just didn't, there was something in my gut that was just telling me like, don't do it, like, let's just go to plan B. So that's what we did. my other doctor, Dr. K, was like, okay, so cerclage is out. Let me prescribe you progesterone suppositories. And these are like these small orange pills that you take vaginally, and it's supposed to basically stabilize your cervix, something like that. And she was like, just try not to move, try to be on bed rest from here on out. So we get home and I immediately go on my bed. We call my parents and basically say Thanksgiving is out and I'm gonna be in this bed until further notice. And they're like, what the hell? Like they didn't know what was happening up until this point. So they flew out right away. They set up a whole table in our master bedroom. We had dinners there. My little sister came and her boyfriend, and they would like stay and keep me company. We'd watch shows on Netflix. We rewatched America's Next Top Model from like beginning to end. It was just like a good time to like get me to stop thinking about everything that was happening. Lonnie lived on that bed with me. It was so funny. He would basically protect my belly. Anyone who would come next to me, he would bark at them. He was very territorial at that point. He was my little protector. From 23 weeks up until 29 weeks, I was on bed rest. I didn't move. I was afraid to sneeze, to poop, to cough. I was afraid to do anything that would put pressure on my cervix. I just remember setting little goals for myself, like let's get to 24 weeks, then they'll try to save my baby if something happens. Okay, we made it to 24 weeks, let's just get to 26 weeks, then 28 weeks, then I'll be in my third trimester. Just like little goals. And I even joined, I went back on Facebook and I joined this support group for other moms who are going through the same thing, and it really helped me to hear their stories, because some had it like even worse than me. Some had like basically no cervix left at all, and were basically in like a trund. I can't remember what the name of it, but they basically had to be inverted, so like gravity would like help take the pressure off their cervix. So like there were women who were like in even worse situations, and I know it sounds horrible, but it made me feel better about my situation. Like, okay, I'm not the worst. Fast forward, we get to 30 weeks and the doctor's like, okay, at this point your baby is big enough that he's basically sitting on your pelvic bone for support and not your cervix, so you really don't need to be on bed rest anymore. That was like the biggest relief, because bed rest was great for like the resting portion, but mentally it was just a lot. It was very draining to just be in that position for that long. So I was like so happy to be free and out of the bed. She's like, don't go crazy, but like you can walk around and like go get your own food and not have to worry about sneezing. I was still on the progesterone suppositories that she had given me, and she told me to take that up until the end of my 36th week. From 37 weeks on, the baby was viable to be born and wouldn't be considered premature, so I really didn't have to take those anymore. So I was like, oh great. So literally 36 weeks and 6 days, I put my last progesterone suppository in. 37 weeks, that night I go to sleep for the first time without taking it, and literally 3 hours later at midnight 12:02, my water breaks. So basically those little orange pills were holding everything in place, because it was just ready to go. Mind you, at that time I was also ready. I was like the biggest I had ever been in my life. My stomach was stretched to the max. Declan was measuring huge, so I was just like, I can't do this for another 3 more weeks. Like this baby needs to come now. So I was very welcoming to my water breaking. I was like, yes, we're doing it. Now up until this point, I had not seen my regular doctor, Dr. C, the black lady doctor that I sought out so hard. I had not seen her since pretty much my 20-week appointment. I had been handed over to my maternal fetal medicine, Dr. K, and she basically took over my care, but she doesn't do deliveries. So I had to go back to Dr. C. Tell me why she was nowhere to be found. She was nowhere to be found. The nurse, the schedulers were basically like, oh no, Dr. C, she's on vacation for the next 6 weeks. For the next 6 weeks. Mind you, this was the same lady who said it was a 90% chance that she would be delivering my baby. And I had asked her that specifically because I didn't want Dr. N delivering my baby, because I knew he would be too busy and he wouldn't give me the attention that I needed during that time. So for her to now be on vacation for 6 weeks, come to find out she was filming for the TV show that she's on, I just felt so betrayed. And she had never mentioned anything about her being out or a possibility of her being out. She said a 90% chance she would be there to deliver my baby. Come to find out from the nurses at the hospital, this lady hasn't delivered a baby in a year or two. So I was like, okay, clearly this lady, it just wasn't meant to be with her. She just was it was a mess from the beginning. She just was so dismissive. She's the worst. So I was like, okay, everything happens for a reason. Her and me weren't meant to be. So this leads me to the birth story of my baby Declan. After my water broke, I took a shower, which was a waste because I didn't realize that your water leaks until you give birth. So I took a shower just to still be leaking. And then we made it to the hospital around 3 a.m. We get to the hospital, I get my epidural. My epidural has to be done 3 times. First time, only my left side was paralyzed. Second time, only my right side was paralyzed. Third time, he finally got it in the right groove. Birdie was dead asleep, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't do this one more time. Like, you better get this right this time. He finally got it, and I got to rest a little bit. I say rest because you can't really rest at a hospital. Like, there's everyone always in the room checking on you, which is great. But sometimes you just want to be like, can you get out of my room so I can like sleep? But when I got to the hospital, I was 4 centimeters dilated when they gave me the epidural. From then on, I think I got to 6 centimeters, and then they were like, okay, like let's try to different positions to like keep you moving along. Dr. N, who was supposed to be delivering my baby, didn't come see me one time. I don't know what the protocol is for doctors coming to see their delivering patients, but I thought at least he would come say hi or something, but I never saw him once until the baby was crowning. Now this could be because, like I said, he was so busy, like there's so many women under his care, which is why I didn't want him delivering my baby in the first place. So at some point, I think at 12 p.m., the nurse comes in and she's like, the Dr. N is trying to schedule you for a C-section. And I was like, why? I thought you said everything was going well. She couldn't say too much, so she gave me this face, and I was like, oh, like I understood what she was saying. So she's like, let's just try to get you moving so like we don't have to do that. And I was like, okay, perfect. So she puts me in different positions. We try to work it out. She leaves me to rest, comes back. She's like, Dr. N says, if you're not ready to go by 4 p.m., that I need to set up the OR. And I was like, why? And she's like, well, that's when he gets off shift. And I'm like, this mother. This is exactly what I didn't want to do. It wasn't for any medical reason or any issues with the baby. So I was like, okay, I get it. I think I got to 10 centimeters and she was like, okay, let's just start pushing at least. Let's like try to get the baby crowning and get the baby moving down. So we start pushing and she gets the baby pretty much crowning. And that's when finally, after 16-hour labor, Dr. N graces us with his presence, only to say, I thought I told you to prep the OR, to the nurse. Not even a hello, like, how you doing to me, nothing. And she's like, oh, well, the baby's already crowning, so we're here now. And I'm like, bless your heart, lady, bless your heart. I really didn't want a C-section. Like, mind you, I'm not gonna put my baby in danger. If it really came down to it, I would do it. And I was trusting her word. Up until this point, the only reason a C-section had been brought up was to work within Dr. N's schedule. So I was like, no, he can wait so I can have this baby. He reluctantly starts to put on his gear and he's like, okay, let's have this baby then. And then a bunch of people descend upon the room. I think by when I was giving birth, maybe like 16 people were in the room. There's like 5 nurses, the 2 nurses down there with a doctor, I think like students, I don't know, they seemed really young. It was just a very awkward delivery also because the nurse that had been with me was like trying to give me like pointers and the doctor was like giving the opposite. And I was like, okay, I mean, I don't know, like, who should I be listening to? Because this is very awkward. Like, it just made for a very awkward experience. But finally, Declan's head came out. So at this point, he's trying to get the shoulders out. And he's like, I need to make an incision. And I'm like, no, like I want to tear naturally. Like they had said in the birthing books. He's like, if you tear naturally, you're going to basically tear your whole, like you're going to tear from top to bottom. And I was like, okay, do whatever you need to do. I was like, give me, snip where you need to snip. Like, so he gives me an episiotomy basically, gets the shoulders out. Declan is born weighing 9 pounds, 10 ounces, 3 weeks early. So he was a big baby. But at the end of the day, like after I heard him cry for the first time. It just, all the frustration, all of the trauma up until that point had basically vanished. Everything was so worth it to get to this point where I have my baby alive, breathing. It was just such a magical moment. And just as quickly as Dr. Navi came in, he swooped out like Batman. And I was left with the nurses, and it was just a wonderful time. Basically, this whole experience was an experience of learning to be an advocate for yourself and figure things out for yourself, to be honest, because these doctors aren't going to tell you shit. It just opened my eyes this time around to really speak up for myself and be educated enough to speak up for myself. You don't know what you don't know. So do as much research as you can so you can at least like figure out when you're being played or figure out if things are not normal. Declan's whole pregnancy journey, it was very bittersweet. Like, the sweet is obviously having my baby here and all that, but just like the whole experience turned me off. I was like, how do some women like being pregnant? Because this is like the worst experience of all time. And it wasn't until this pregnancy that I really realized how badly I was treated with that last pregnancy, how not normal a lot of things that happened during that pregnancy are, and how wonderful a pregnancy experience can be that was kind of stolen from me during that period. So I have to move on. My baby is 2 years old and 2 months now. Like, I would do it all over again to be in this exact same spot. So I can't complain too much. But if you get nothing else from my journey, it's just to be your own advocate, because this whole medical system is for the birds. Sorry. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on another Mom Chat Mondays.